Talking about the SMSL SU1, it's a tiny, tiny DAC. Does it dethrone the king of affordable DACs made by shit? Let's find out. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the SMSL SU1. The fine folks over at Shenzhen Audio sent in the SMSL SU1, but they didn't tell me what to say, so all these thoughts are my own. And that's difficult for me to think for myself. It is a very small DAC. Here's what it looks like compared to a tape measure. Here's what it looks like compared to an Iron Man action figure. Here's what it looks like compared to a Metallica guitar pick that I caught in the crowd. And this is what it looks like compared to a vintage receiver pin from Just Audio. So it's small. It's teeny tiny. There hasn't been a DAC this small to my, well, there's small DACs, but one like this since the Topping D50S. I think this one's actually a little bit smaller. I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. You remember that song? When I was in HE Double Toothpick Week at my fraternity, they played that song all day long. 24 hours for a week. We listened to the same song for a week as we got thrashed. Good times back when hazing was an acceptable part of society. You got one button on the front, and then you have MQA, USB, optical, and coaxial little LED. On the back, you have one set of RCA outputs. You have a coaxial in, an optical in, and a USB in that doubles as the power. So if you have this connected to a computer, your computer is going to be providing power. However, if you're using the optical or coaxial in, like I like to do, then you can power it with any 5-volt power supply you have. iFi also makes a low noise switching power supply, and there are linear power supplies floating around. But more importantly, you could take a regular old battery power bank, the one that you would carry with you on a trip, plug that into here. Sometimes people say batteries provide lower noise. And then take a USB-C cable, plug it into one of your regular cell phone charger bricks, and see if you can hear a difference. Let's talk about what's under the hood. Under the hood, at the heart of this little tiny DAC, and a DAC is a digital to analog converter. I guess I should have talked about that before, which means if you're listening to streaming services, CDs, or anything with a digital output, you get one of these, and generally speaking, if it's an older device, if it's a laptop, if it's a phone, this is going to provide you with better sound quality. I don't want to get into it too much, because number one, I probably can't explain it. But number two, they work. Under the hood, we have an AKM 4493S chipset. So the 4493S chipset came out post-fire at the AKM factory. If you didn't know, shut down their entire production, but they are up and running, and the 4493S is a chip that's come out of the factory after the fire. I talked to an industry source, and the 4493 versus the 4493S, there may be slight differences, but anybody that's putting a 4493 chipset in their DACs is using the 4493S now. Anyway, it also has a XMOS SU316 processor in here. You need a processor because this thing will work with MQA. I don't know if you know MQA, but it is a format that Tidal uses. Tidal is a streaming service. The future of MQA is unknown. I know their biggest investor pulled out of the situation. So MQA isn't doing well from a business standpoint. Will it continue? I don't know. But this guy can do MQA CDs. For the 7 or 8 titles out there that use MQA CDs, this little guy has you covered. It has a CNC aluminum alloy housing, has versatile connectivity, pretty much what every other DAC has. And it says that it comes with a convenient remote control, which if it does, I don't recall it. I couldn't find it if it was in the box. It supports DSD files and PCM 32-bit up to 768 kilohertz, so it will have you covered for all your high-resolution needs. Claims to have 121 dB of dynamic range and 121 dB of signal-to-noise ratio, which are crazy high numbers. At the end of the day, though, a DAC is a DAC. You probably want to know how this compares to the competition. So let's talk about what I compared it to. The obvious comparison would be to the shit Modi 3 Plus Pro Plus E dash 2.0. Whatever the latest shit Modi is. Because they come in at a similar price range. This comes in at $80. $79.99, which is a great price for a little DAC. The Modi comes in at $130. So that's a $50 differential, which somebody could use to buy a pair of headphones. Well, maybe not great ones, but they could. However, I did not have the Modi in here anymore because I gave it to a friend who I'm trying to get into the hobby. So I compared it to the next best thing that I knew, which was the Geshelli Labs J2 AKM version that has a 4493S chipset in it. I wanted to hear if this $80 DAC could sound the same as my favorite $250 DAC. Because if all the chips sound the same, then it should sound the same. Kind of like a turntable. Kind of like two turntables and a microphone. Two turntables and a phono cartridge. If the tables have the same phono cartridge, in theory they should sound the same. Yes? Well, it gets more complicated with the DACs because the integration, really the analog back end, the boot, the trunk, is what really colors most of the sound on a DAC, at least in my experience. What is my experience? Well, I've probably listened to 100 DACs. A lot of them sound the same, but some of them do sound different. I also used the Geshelli Labs Arkle 2.5 headphone amplifier. The headphones that I spent the most time on were the Hifiman 400 SE, which come in around $100. Oftentimes you can even find them for $80. I think that's a great headphone, and it's probably the price of headphones that one is going to be using when they are using this DAC. Because this is an affordable DAC. Probably going to have it on an affordable headphone amp, and you're probably going to be listening to affordable headphones. Because this is $79.99. Did I mention that? I also tried it on the Meze 109 Pros. They're an $800 headphone. Also tried it on the Hifiman Edition XS, which is a $500 headphone, but the majority of my listening was on the 400 SE. I also used the SMSL SH6 headphone amplifier in conjunction with this. So let's just get this out of the way. The SH6, which is a $120 headphone amp, didn't hold a candle to the Geshelli Labs Arkle 2.5. Now that's more expensive, comes in around $219. But I wanted a headphone amplifier it's going to reveal just how good this DAC is. Also put it in the office here. Had a Ween Pro going into this, and then this going into an analog input, and the PT2 going into the A1 monoblocks into my Wharfdale Evo 4.1s. More expensive system for sure, but I wanted to see if this thing could do as good of a job as my reference DACs. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. How does it sound? Well, this thing sounds pretty darn good. I made a video about another DAC that used the 4493S, and I said the S stands for Shibalunch. I can't remember when it was. I think it was another SMSL DAC, but I think it was a more expensive DAC, $200. If I can find it, I'll link it right here in the description. Anyway, I was not impressed with their implementation of the 4493S. I did hear a little bit of that sibilance, or I did hear a little bit of concentration up in the treble area around the 4,000 to 6,000, 6K range where people can start to sound like that. Now, that's going to be either exacerbated or kind of compensated for depending upon your headphone amp and also your headphones. So if you have a headphone that is prone to sibilance, then chances are this DAC is not going to be the choice for you. However, with that said, the Edition XS can be a little bit sibilant. But with this, on the Geshelli Labs Arkle 2.5, I didn't really notice it all that much. It was there initially, but the longer I listened, the less distracting the sibilance became, which made me kind of scratch my head is this thing better than that really expensive or more expensive SMSL DAC that I reviewed earlier? The answer is, I think it is. I don't know what they're doing on the analog side of this, but it does sound better to my ear than that previous unnamed model number. So this video really isn't all that helpful for you, is it? But I'll figure it out. I'll probably put it right here when I figure out exactly what the model number was on that. Now, comparing it to the J2, the AKM version, same chip set, I found that the Shelly Labs J2 was much more organic sounding. None of the sibilance issues, if you can call it an issue, but it doesn't mean that I thought it sounded better. I mean, personally, I do think it sounded better, but I think a lot of people are gonna find they may even prefer the sound signature of the SU1 to the J2, simply because this one is a little bit more exciting on top. Not to mention, I think I heard a little bit more air through this thing. If you want kind of realistic reproduction of the music, then the J2 is the way to go, for sure, if you have the budget. But if you don't have the budget and you want to spend a quarter of the price of the J2, I think the SU1 is a great alternative. If you have some warmer headphones, 5.8X from Sennheiser, 6XX from Sennheiser, I think this is really going to inject a little bit of excitement into those headphones. When I compared the Arkel 2.5 to the SMSL SH6 headphone amplifiers, the sound on the SH6 just kind of seemed like a ball. It wasn't bad. It was clean, it was clear, but it wasn't spread out. If you can swing a little bit of extra money to get a better headphone amp, you're going to hear what this thing really can do. On my system here in the office on speakers, I was really surprised. This thing didn't quite have the soundstage as the J2, but it was not embarrassed. The bass isn't as fleshed out, but it is not thin. This is very dynamic, clean on the top without being chalky or harsh or grainy or digitally. This sounds really good. And guess what? To my ear, it sounds very similar to the Skit Modi 3 Plus. Wasn't able to do a direct A-B comparison, but in my memory, in my brain, it sounded awful similar. I think SMSL has a winner on their hands, and now we have another option for a DAC that I kind of put my stamp of approval on. I don't know what application you have, but you can take this on the road with you if you travel. This thing could fit right into your pocket if you had one on your shirt or your back pocket, although be careful what you sit on. Maybe don't go plopping down on a concrete bench. So you can get a $100 or $80 pair of headphones, this little guy for 80 bucks, a Weem Mini, or you can go straight through your computer, and you can have a really great sounding desktop or travel setup for not a ton of money. As it is though, I think this is the best sounding affordable DAC that I've heard under $100. And I really liked that it was a little bit more exciting on top. Heard a little bit more air, a little bit more stuff going on. It was definitely a different flavor than the J2 that I have, the AKM. I think the SU1 is an awesome option for you to look into. Highly recommended. $80 DAC option now that I don't think anybody is making any concessions with. So if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night we have Patreon-only Zooms, Patreon-only Discord, Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also use the links in the description. Most of those will be affiliate links, which means if you click and you buy, I do get a commission, but it doesn't cost you any more, so it's a great way to support the channel. You can also sign up for Amazon Music, Tidal, or Roon. Links in the description. Click sign up. They have a trial period. Even if you quit, though, I still get a couple of dollars. And you can also use the thanks button down at the bottom of the video. Give me a couple of dollars. Fill this thing with coffee, but don't feel compelled to buy me anything. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen, maybe through your tiny new SMSL SU1 DAC. And fill your soul with happiness. When that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.